Good Friday morning. I'm going to just stay with the Gospel of Luke, okay? Not the text for today, but the text from yesterday, the second half of it. I got wound up on that other business, okay? But I want to just say a very personal note. And that's when he says, in the Gospel and when he says about going to the towns, okay? He said, stay. He said, stay wherever you are. Okay, let me see if I get it to you. Stay in the same house and eat and drink what is offered to you, for the labor deserves his payment. Whatever. See, whatever town you enter and they welcome you, eat what is set before you, cure the sick, say to them the kingdom of God is at hand. I have to say, beyond my wildest imagination, I have to say, when I think back in 1965, when I heard this text read, I had no idea the adventure that was going to take place in my life. And then when I came to St. Louis, I beat this thing to death because it's such a mystery of grace to me. When I came here in 71, my little green Volkswagen, I have to say, I never dreamt I'd be here 50 years later. This text really speaks to me in the first hand of the harvest, because I remember where I was in the monastery in 64, 65. And our hope was very visible, very real, because we had a house full of potential students, okay, seminarians, okay, but the kids that would join the outfit. How empty it became, how fast it became empty. So there's that bite that I spoke about in yesterday's text, okay, yesterday. But then I also spoke about the hope of tomorrow. You see, in the eyes of my students and the children, many years later, almost 60 years later, okay? It ain't over till it's over, to quote Yogi Berra. It ain't over till it's over. But it also, there's something charmingly wonderful in that text for me, because when I came here, I never expected to stay. I expected to go right back to where I had been just 6 years before, Jamaica, Long Island. That's where I expected to be, being trained to go back to teach in our monastery, the very thing that I had experienced. But by 77, 75, just 10 years later, we had closed our monastery school. We didn't have passionists. We didn't have any students. That room full of students, potential students, never became passionate students. They never became us. And therefore, there was no place for me to teach. There was no one to teach. See? And since I was out of life, I had no job. Put me out of work. You see, the things that happened. What I was being trained to do, there was no purpose for it anymore. And I remember when Norb Dorsey eventually became a bishop. Great man. God, he was a wonderful man. He was a provincial consultant, number 2, okay? He was in charge of students like me, students in grad studies. And he told me to get a job. And it was the funniest thing. See, that I would never heard of before. So the very fact that here I found such a lovely place to live, the people of the parish of St. Timothy's, I never dreamt that I would ever be here so many years, but I stayed 5, and it was, I formed the deepest friendships of my life, especially with Junie and her family. Incomparable. As one of my classmates said, John O'Brien, God rest his soul, he visited here a lot. And John said to me one time, he said, Ted, they're not your friends, that's your family. That was a powerful line. They're your friends. They're not your friends. They're your family. And I would say that of the parish, that especially that generation. We became intimate friends. We were friends together. I love that line from Marie Samaritan about her marriage, but the friendship. We were friends together. I love that title, Friends Together. It's a verb. It means it's an action. And then I went to Louisville, as you know, some of you know anyway, and I taught there at Bellarmine, but I never disconnected from St. Louis because of my friendships and also my love of the parish and the goodwill of the pastors, because they always welcomed me back. They could have easily have said, forget about it, Charlie. They didn't. And so I stayed, in a sense, even when I lived 250 miles away, I was still intimate to St. Timothy's Parish. In fact, I came back for funerals and weddings, for sure, and also helped out at times when they needed somebody to take in, when transfers and this and that. We had some headaches there, okay? And it's amazing, because I would have never predicted that in 1971, that in 1975, okay, I would 10 years later be in a parish and come back 13 years later, okay, in 89, roughly speaking, at 76 to 39, 89, that I would come back and still every day same Mass there. In fact, this thing here that I'm doing now is from St. Mark's. Yeah, yeah. Who would have believed it? Not me. Not in a million years would I have believed that I would still be part of a parish, a family, just what Christ says here. Now let's talk about the food, okay? The barbecues, okay? You want a true story? This is a beautiful story. How much I love this parish, and I love frankly, the culture of South St. Louis. I really do. It's a place in which the church demands that you prove yourself as a clergyman. In New England, you wear a collar, you get a free ride. Trust me. Okay, I don't know if it's true anymore, but in my father's time, the restaurant, he told me 125 priests eat a week free. Somebody always picks up the tab, okay? That's a true story. My father's restaurant, where he was a waiter, was the swankiest restaurant in New England. It was rated #1 by the AAA. So these guys were eating high on the hog and never had to put up a nickel, okay? I came out here. I say it was in my blood in a way. I knew my father said I'd never been in the parish. I lived in a monastery. But when I came out here, I joined St. Tim's, okay? And so Father Cronin was the pastor. He took me out to dinner. It's a cute story. Well, I'm thinking the Tivoli or some version of the Tivoli restaurant, some high-end joint, okay? We went to Phil's Barbecue with the newspaper on the tables. Well, I said, well, this is different. Well, the next night, we went out again. I said, well, no, we go to some high-end joint. We ended up at the Kramer's. You know what Kramer's is on Bayless? Family restaurant, kids flying off the wall. And I knew this was different. And Cronin picked up the tab. Nobody picked up the tab for us. And I knew this was right. Lou Camario told me, God rest him, 2 years later, he said, Father Ted, you're learning. You're learning. That's a great line. You're learning. You're catching on. The parish is teaching you. I knew here you earned your way. And I think that's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. As a clergyman here, you earn your way by your fidelity to what you've been called to be. No free ride, no free lunch. Put up or shut up. I believe this. This is the right culture. I believe that. We come to serve, we bring peace, but by God, we better bring it. We didn't come here to take, we came here to give. That's a true story. St. Tim's and St. Mark's taught me a great deal about the priesthood, about my service, about our service, what the role of the church is. No free ride. No free ride. We come to bring the gospel of Christ, and we come both to listen and to speak. And if we listen, we will become wise through the wisdom of the church in the flesh. That's the truth. You want to know who Christ is? And I tell the people of St. Tim's and St. Mark's now, look around. Look around. It's the working stiff. People struggling to be faithful to their families and their spouses. Faithful to Christ's call to them. You want to see what it looks like? It looks like that guy going to work in the morning. It looks like a young woman going off to her work. Sometimes the most powerful image I remember, I'll share this with you, okay? I saw very good friends of mine, the Heinrichs, when they came up for communion. It's a poignant portrait. Barb was coming up, but Kathy was a little girl. This was a long time ago. It was 50 years ago, 48, 49 years ago. Kathy was trudging behind her, holding her hand. Now, Kathy's a medical doctor today, okay? I saw how the faith was passed on by the hands of a parent. She came up to communion, maybe 4 years old, 3 or 4, holding on to her mother's hand. 3 years old, holding on to her mother's hand. I knew what the church was at that moment. St. Tim's taught me. Barb Heinrichs and little Kathy taught me. That's the truth. That's the truth. I'm graced by God. One of the greatest gifts God ever gave me was to come here to St. Tim's and St. Mark's, where I discovered the church. That's the truth. I'm eternally grateful, and the order has blessed me. The order has let me have a marvelous career in the universities and to stay here at St. Mark's and St. Tim's. Not what I thought. Certainly not in 1965, 56 years ago. but what is true.